5 days after Tim up and vanished, one of Larissa's employees walked into the police department and gave detectives the break they desperately needed. She said she knew about Tim's disappearance and she wanted police to know that she had an unusual encounter with Larissa over the weekend.
Larissa asked me if I knew anybody that had a truck with a lift gate so she could move a rototiller.
She didn't. So Larissa asked Leslie to rent a truck for her in Leslie's name. Then Larissa took the truck. But she must have had a lot of trouble with the rototiller because she kept the truck out for hours. When Larissa finally brought it back, Leslie checked the mileage on the rental paperwork and noticed Larissa had only driven the truck 17 miles. Larissa lived 20 miles from the lab.
And I had even questioned Larissa. I said, "Is that all the mileage that you put on?" And she's, "Oh, it's not that far." Something in my gut tells me that this is not right.
And there was something else. When Leslie came into work the next day, one of her co-workers mentioned that it looked like someone had been in the back room at the lab over the weekend. Things had been moved around, and a big blue barrel they kept back there was missing.
That was the turning point for me. All the dots started connecting at that point.
Leslie laid out everything that happened over the weekend for detectives, including Larissa's cryptic parting words when she dropped off the truck.
Larissa said, "Don't say anything about the storage unit."
Yes, there was a storage unit. Leslie told detectives Larissa had rented it a year earlier to hide some things she didn't feel Tim was entitled to in the divorce. And just like the rental truck, Larissa had gotten Leslie to rent the storage unit in her name. Before Leslie even left the station, detectives had a couple of patrol officers swing by the storage facility to see if anyone working there had any info about Larissa, a rental truck, or a blue barrel. No one did, but officers found something else.
I received a phone call from one of them that was on scene. I distinctly remember him telling me that I needed to get out to the storage unit because there was a horrific smell coming from the area where her storage unit was.
With Larissa being a chemist, we didn't know what could be in there.
When the door rolled up, the smell was so intense, police needed the same kind of breathing gear that hazmat investigators use to get close.
I looked inside, and I saw Christmas decorations and just some knickknacks.
And a few wicker baskets that looked a lot like the ones reportedly stolen from Tim's house. But that's not what really caught Detective Cook's attention. Behind the Christmas decorations and underneath the wicker baskets, there was a piece of cardboard wrapped around a large object. As detectives moved toward it, they realized it was the source of the hideous stench. And when they removed the cardboard, they found a large blue barrel, and no one could believe what was inside.
The barrel was just about full of some sort of thick liquid, and there was just body parts. I could recognize a leg bone and parts of a leg.
Now it was clear what caused the terrible smell. It was human flesh dissolving in hydrochloric acid.
That was probably one of the most disgusting things that I have ever seen in my 20-plus years in law enforcement. There was so much damage from the amount of acid that was in there, it was very difficult to tell anything other than we knew we had found a body inside of a barrel, and now we had to make sure that it was Tim.
They took the barrel from Larissa's storage unit back to the lab. It would take a DNA test to positively identify the melted remains. And where was Larissa while all this was happening? She was in sunny Florida, beginning a much-needed vacation. Detectives worked quickly on getting an arrest warrant and extradition order. In the meantime, they brought in Larissa's go-to guy, James Fagone, to see what he knew about Larissa's storage unit and the body in the barrel. And this time, James was far more open with police.
So you talked with her about killing Tim?
She had said that she wanted to. And,
What did she say?
well, just that, she just sick and tired of it. And I knew she would try and pull me in on it, but
And she did.
yeah.
She did. So what did she say?
She did pull you in, James.
We know that.
And that's why you're here and that's why we're talking, okay?
And that's when 21-year-old James Fagone cracked like a fragile porcelain doll. He told detectives the whole story of the night Tim disappeared.
You guys go over there and you go to the front door,
Yeah. Front door.
and what happens at that front door?
I heard some talking. I kind of stepped aside to where I could be seen.
James said he could hear her say, "I'm at the front door. I need your help."
Tim brought his gun to the door just to make sure Larissa wasn't setting him up. When he saw Larissa standing outside alone looking distraught, he believed she needed his help. That's when Tim tucked the gun in the seat cushion. Then he opened the door.
James lunged from the shadows at that point and tackled Tim.
James was smaller than Tim, but he had two things on his side: the element of surprise and a stun gun that Larissa had asked him to buy for the occasion.
You know what part of his body impacted him with it?
Just all over. I was just trying to, whatever.
How did he react to that?
He was just like, I figured that's what was going to happen.
Did he say anything?
He was just like, hey, what the hell is going on?
There was a struggle. Tim reached out and clawed Larissa's leg. She used chloroform to subdue him and put him into a deep sleep. Larissa and James drove him back to Larissa's house. Once inside her garage, Larissa and James transferred Tim from the truck to the large, empty blue barrel.
When you guys were putting him in the barrel, when you guys were putting Tim in the barrel, what was he doing when that was going on?
Well, he was real like that, and I heard some noise like breathing, but
Did he ever say anything?
nah,
Did he ever moan?
sounded kind of like that.
And there it was, the horrible truth. Tim was still alive when they put him in the barrel. But this kidnapping was going to end in murder. Larissa dragged out a case of hydrochloric acid bottles she was hiding in her garage and started pouring them, one by one, into the barrel.
So that means that while he's in the barrel and she's pouring the acid on him, he's either dying as a result of aspiration of the acid fumes or from actual immersion in the acid. You can't fathom somebody actually dying like that. It just seems like it would be so painful and so horrible.
In fact, the fumes were so caustic, they made even seasoned chemist Larissa woozy. After just 3 bottles, she had to stop pouring the acid and get the lid back on quick. Larissa and James then dragged the barrel to the garden shed and called it a night. Remember Larissa's interview with the police the day after her husband was reported missing?
What is your gut feeling on where he's at right now? Is he alive? Is he dead? What's your gut feeling?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
And the whole time she was talking to police, her missing husband was not missing at all. When she was finished, it was as if it was any other day. She went back home and hopped into the hot tub where James was waiting for her.
How do you go about your life knowing that there's a dead guy in a barrel in your side yard?
Exactly what Larissa must have been thinking while she was sipping Chardonnay and warming her feet in the jacuzzi.
She looked at James and said, "I can't keep him here. You need to help me move him."
So just a few hours after she'd been questioned by police, In the wee hours of Saturday morning, Larissa and James dragged the barrel with Tim inside out of the shed and brought it over to her lab. When they got to the lab, Larissa opened the barrel. 3 gallons of acid hadn't done the job. To get rid of Tim completely, she needed to add more. After topping off the barrel,
I was like, can I get out of here? And she's like, yeah, I've got it from here. Just go home and shut up and you'll be okay.
but Larissa realized everything wasn't okay. After adding the additional acid, the barrel began to smell. And it was probably going to get worse before it got better. It couldn't stay at the lab. But the logical chemist Larissa was always thinking. That's when she talked to Leslie about helping her get a rental truck.
You want to take him?
Now that police knew exactly what happened, it was time to bring Larissa Schuster in for the cold-hearted and brutal murder of her husband, Tim.